Okay, this is the second reading of Hume for the class. We're going to start out, Hume will start out talking about what he's going to call academic or skeptical philosophy. Now, the academic is a reference to Plato's Academy as it continues on after his death. It was called the Middle Academy, where they started adapting more towards Plato's view of kind of this moderate skepticism. At the most we could ever come up with was a likely account, a likely to be true story, right, of how things are, that the rest of the matters were so obscure as to be right incapable of solution in terms of knowledge. Now Hume will continue on in this academic, right, or moderate skeptical, or extreme skepticism if you ask some people, right, approach to human knowledge, right. Now skepticism is a view that we should suspend judgment on nearly every belief, if not every belief, that there's not enough evidence to decide these matters and therefore we should just hold off. Right, so Hume is going to be abdicating, right? He starts off with a project, right, to diagram and create, like Newton did, the three laws of motion. He wants to create the three laws of psychological association, right, but is unable, right, to come back with a positive answer. So he returns with the best results he can find, which is this negative or skeptical answer, that the best we can do when it comes to beliefs is, right, count them as a form of custom, things we're accustomed to believing, right, or forms of habit. Right, but not things that are product, right, of an intellectual process, right? That's just not possible. We're too limited as an inquirer. For Hume, we're extremely limited as inquirers. We're limited to this very limited, right, this idea of, right, just pure sentiment, right? What we like is what we believe, what we don't like, we dismiss. But there's really no other criteria that we're using to evaluate our beliefs than this, right, just emotional criteria. Right. Now Hume will move on to start talking about, this isn't a footnote, it's an important footnote, however, right, so I recommend you go back and take a look at it, where he's talking about pre-established harmony. And in this you've got the idea of two clocks set in motion, right, and they keep perfect time, yet they never interact. For Hume, there's something like this going on between our senses, right, and how nature actually behaves, right. It's not how often, right, we get things wrong, it's how often we get things right. Right, that's the important criteria here when you look at it that way. Right, it took Thomas Edison 10,000 attempts to make a light bulb, not a billion. If he was guessing randomly, it'd probably take more than a billion. It'd nearly be impossible. All the random things you could do to make, right, a light effective and working. Right, you could juggle different color balls. Right, you could juggle squares and triangles. You could try all kinds of different mechanisms, juggling on a tricycle. None of these things are related, right, to producing light as we know how to do it, right, but how could you rule that out in the beginning part unless you had some connection, right, in our minds, between our minds and how nature actually works, right, and this is what we call about pre-established harmony, this kind of established harmony, right, between, right, our minds and actual course of nature. Now, there's no reason to, right, go into clocks, for example. This can be explained very well as Hume is hinting towards a theory of evolution. You have to keep in mind Hume was pre-Darwin, so theory of evolution has only been suggested, right, by a few, right, Greek thinkers, but never really fully developed out. Right, so he's working his way towards this idea, because over time, right, evolutionarily, you can make sense of how our minds and senses are attuned somewhat, right, to nature. So this is kind of what Hume is talking about as he's putting this together, this idea there's something else here, but I can't put a finger on it, so I'm just going to call it sentiment, habit, custom, right, but it's not justified or warranted belief, as we'll be talking about in the last book. Right, and one of the better arguments Hume will come up with for this, for these matters of fact, as he's going to call them, right, we have two areas of human knowledge, the relations among ideas. These things are true by definition, right? All A are B, all B are C, therefore all A are C. Or mathematics are called formal definitions. All bachelors are unmarried males. Sleeping pills have dormant powers, right? These are all definitional matters and true by definitions. These Hume will call relations among ideas in the text. Another class of things he's going to distinguish are called matters of fact. Right, matters of fact are the sky is blue, the grass is green, are common examples, right? But anything we can kind of prove or disprove by, right, reference to the external world, reference to our senses. Right, now Hume has got a pretty good argument here for his, right, ultimate skepticism, right? And this is that there's no evidence that the future resemble the past, right? And his argument for this is that we've had experience of the past becoming past futures, but we've never had an experience, right, of future futures. Now, if all of our information, if all of our knowledge, if everything we know comes from experience, as Hume has proved out in the first chapter with his argument that all of our ideas first in the impressions, So if we have to have first sensory evidence of something, and since we've had no sensory evidence of the future, of future futures, right, by definition, right, you cannot get examples of future futures until they are obtained in the longer future futures, right? So since we have no examples of future futures, we cannot have any justifiable or warranted claims. We have no evidence on these matters, right? So Hume's going to end with this kind of ultimate skepticism, because all matters of fact for him are based upon this cause and effect relationship that breaks down in the future, right? All matters of fact break down and just become matters of sentiment, belief, custom, or habit. Now, this isn't a very satisfying answer, and that's what we'll go on the last book to take a look at another way, right, of answering these questions and making sense out of this whole thing, right? But Hume has come back with a negative, shall we say, conclusion. Plato asks a very powerful question, why be moral? And then spends a lot of time giving us a positive answer to this response, right? His theory of justice, right, and individual justice of human psychology. Hume is a second-tier philosopher, I want to say. He's got a very, very good question. How is it we can claim to know things, right? But not a very good answer, right? Unsatisfactory answer. So we're going to go on and supplement, right, David Hume's reading with this last book to see if we can come up with a better answer to how we might go about forming, right, justified, warranted, or non-arbitrary beliefs about ourselves and our surroundings. Thank you, everybody.